Hello and welcome back at Shaman and Pooney. Now joined by Bet99's Matthew Barnaby. Barney, before the break, Albert was talking to George Laroque about all things pugilism in the NHL. Now, listen, when I learned about hockey, right, you were playing, right? I was new to the country. I loved the pugilism, the fights, right? Now, I looked at your record in the NHL, and you fought a lot, but never against George Laroque, I don't think. Like, how scared of you was he?
Yeah, he was very scared of me, and I understand why. I played at 182 pounds. I think George played at probably 380 at the time. So, yeah, very scared of me. George, it's funny when you do it for a living, and I fought 400 times between playing junior and the AHL and then the NHL, probably another 200 fights. Every fight there's that risk of getting hurt. There's so many guys that are so tough, and they're all so tough. Everyone always asks, like, who's the toughest? They're all so tough. And George was the heavyweight champ when I was there, just a big guy. But when you get to retire and you meet guys like George and Stu Grimson and Ty Domi, man, they're my best friends. And the things that I said to them along the way, I don't wish I could take back because it was part of my job. But certainly I was like, what the hell was I doing some nights doing what I was doing? But George's a great guy, and man, was he tough.
Well, I mean, you did fight the big boys, though, right? You fought the true heavyweights. I mean, how did you? What was your style to just avoid being killed out there? And I say that half joking because,
Yeah.
I mean, you held your own.
I think, I was in a position, especially when I played in Buffalo. I had Brad May and Rob Ray, Bob Booger, three heavyweight guys, especially Brad and Rob. So I got to pick and choose who I wanted to fight, and usually I got the third or fourth toughest guy along the way. But when you run your mouth and you say things out there, and everything was with the idea to draw a penalty and have a score a goal and win the game. That's all that it ever mattered to me, was winning the game and giving us an edge. But I think when you play a certain role, at least for myself, I felt an obligation at some point. It might not be that game because it was, again, about winning. But later on in the season or the next season, I would certainly oblige. And I was like, I felt like it was a responsibility with the way that I played to answer the bell sometimes. Sometimes it went well. Sometimes it didn't go as well. And turning 50 this year, actually next month. And certainly I'm very optimistic, but cautiously optimistic on how I might feel in the next 5-6 years with the amount of punches I did take.
Now, we're looking at the landscape of the enforcers today. There's really only one prominent one in Ryan Reeves. And George mentioned how, he could have had trouble sleeping before games and all of that. But looking at, if you were playing in today's era, playing the role you played in, would it just be a lot easier now, knowing that you don't have to really answer the bell as much?
Are you kidding? It's a powder puff league, which is absolutely awesome. George mentions the fact that sleeps were tough, afternoon naps. I never napped. After my first couple months in the league, I'm like, every time you go to sleep, it's like a schoolyard fight. And anyone that's had a fight at school, when you're 12 years old or 14 years old, whatever it may be, you're looking at that clock. You're like, oh my God, 3 o'clock's coming. And it seems like it lasts forever. Well, that's every day in the life of a fighter in the National Hockey League. So, yeah, I still can't nap. I'm 50 years old, and I can't nap because I remember having to go, and it was Donald Brashear or it was Ty Domi, whoever it may be. So, yeah, that certainly is different. These guys, the Brad Marchands, who's a great player, Tom Wilson, who's a heavyweight in his own right and can play the game, Ryan Reeves, man, they really can run the gauntlet. There's not a lot of fear that these guys have going into a game, knowing that there really isn't a true heavyweight or someone that can even hurt you in the least bit. It would be nice to play in this league. I'd love it.
Powder puff league. I love that.
Yeah.
To the Leafs now. Matt Murray, the update is he's day-to-day with what sounds like a concussion. The word wasn't used by Sheldon Keefe, but I think you can add one-on-one here. Injury-prone teammates. As a former player, I mean, obviously you have sympathy for them, but it must also get to a point where it's really frustrating when certain players consistently got hurt.
I think that's a really good way of putting it because you're ostracized from your team when you're hurt, right? And the players don't mind you around, but as closer you get to playoffs, you don't even think about those guys. Like zero. You want to focus on the guys that can help you win. And you feel bad because those guys like Matt Murray's Stanley Cup champion, he's dealt with injuries for years and years now. When he came to Ottawa, I didn't understand it. When Toronto picked him up, I didn't understand it. Now, I still thought Samsonov has played his way into being the starter, whether Matt Murray was hurt or he wasn't hurt. But it does become increasingly frustrating because you just like stay healthy, man. And I don't know if I believe in injury prone or bad luck, whatever it may be. And then I'm not saying this in Matt Murray's case, there's also guys I played with along the way that can't play a little hurt. You know, there's a difference between being hurt and injured. To me, injured is a broken leg. Concussions obviously are along the way. They're probably the hardest to deal with because I tried to play through a lot of concussions along the way, and sometimes I was able to, sometimes I wasn't. And then you see guys that might have like a little hangnail and they're out for a couple weeks. No, that's the basketball. Sorry, that's NBA. But it certainly is frustrating because you want guys that are willing to do anything. And I'm taking brain injuries out of that. And maybe I'm going a little off topic, but in general, there wasn't really an injury. If I was easy, I remember wrapping my leg up and seeing guys and taking pills, right or wrong. It's what I did when I had a separated shoulder, and I'd walk in the next morning and my shoulder would be dragging on the ground. I couldn't even lift it. They'd shoot me up and I was ready to go. I didn't feel an absolute thing. Now, that's probably why I had shoulder surgery 2 months later, because of the abuse you take when you can't feel something. That numbing pain is pretty damn good stuff, but it's a touchy subject, but certainly I understand both sides of it.
Moving back to the ice, now you've played on some loaded teams in your career. The Leafs now know their number one goalie, at least for the foreseeable future, will be Ilya Samsonov.
Yeah.
How important is it for a team heading into a playoff stretch to know you have a bona fide number one goalie, a guy back there on a night-to-night basis is going to be in the crease for you guys?
Yeah, people talk about 1A, 1B. What's the best way to do it, or just have a true number one. And any team I've ever been on, when you have a number one guy to rely on, listen, I had Dominic Hasek for 6 years. I might not have liked the guy, but he was arguably the best goaltender that has ever played the game and gave us a chance to win. And all you want is a goalie that's going to give you a chance to win and not cost you a game. Everything else, a lot of things have to fall in line. You have to be disciplined. You have to stay away from injuries, like we talked about. But a goalie that gives you a chance to win every single night and doesn't cost you a game is what you need. And once in a while, you need that guy to steal one. Is Ilya a bona fide number one? I'm not sure. The pressure is going to certainly be ramped up, and the disappointments that Toronto Maple Leafs have had in past years are going to be front and center. And everyone says that, we don't listen to that. We don't listen to Twitter. We don't listen to the radio. We don't watch the bull crap. They all do. They're all lying. And that's just part of being human. I remember going to Colorado and we had David Abisher. Wasn't a bad goaltender. He was our number one, but I don't think he gave us a chance to win every single night. He didn't steal a game for us once in a while. And as loaded as we were, and we had Joe Sakic and Peter Forsberg, Paul Kariya, Teemu Selanne, Mila Hayjuk. I mean, the list goes on and on. We didn't get out of the second round because we didn't have that true number one. So he has a tall task ahead of him. If he can get through the Tampa Bay Lightning, they might build a statue just for getting into the second round.
Oh, they will for sure. There's no doubt. Yeah, there'll be parades, no doubt. So tonight is Columbus, another meaningless game. Hockey is one of the, if not the most emotional sports. How do you play these games, Barney? I mean, a player like yourself, obviously played on a certain level, a certain edge.
Yeah.
You're playing games that mean nothing really in the standings. How do you get up for them?
Yeah, I prided myself on trying to be ready for every single game, whether it was a Tuesday in February against Columbus or who it may be. I always had the analogy of, find a way. I grew up with no money, and if I was ever able to go to a NHL hockey game, I would have wanted effort. And I look at kids or people that, hockey's expensive to go to a game, and you try to give it your most for them. Even some nights when you don't, your body doesn't feel well, or you're not that into it. I know everyone says you should be up for every game, but 82 games with the physical and demands that it takes on your body, it certainly is hard. these ones are really tough. These ones are really, really tough. And I just try to find a way to be the best for the fans that might be there for their first game. That's really the only thing that these people have, and to try to own their game for the start of the playoffs. Try to find that group. So you can't turn it off, you can't turn it on. But certainly these ones where you're locked into a position, you know you're playing the Tampa Bay Lightning, and it's been that way for 4 months pretty well. But these last final games are really, really tough.
Michael Bunting, bit of an agitator out there on the ice, kind of follows the Matthew Barnaby line of play a little bit. Sheldon Keefe was very vocal on Sunday about how he's being officiated by refs and stuff like that. Is his maturation in the playoffs key for the Leafs to have any success? Because he knows, you're not going to get those calls at all in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it is. I think you're going to have that conversation. I've had those conversations because I prided myself on playing hard. He plays really hard. He's your Zach Hyman. You know, he's your guy that does everything that Zach did, and he's come in and filled that role. But the playoffs are different. You're not going to get those calls all the time, and you have to be able to play through them. You have to be very cognizant of the time of game and how you play, and not getting frustrated. I think that's the big thing in the playoffs, is not getting frustrated. It's a really long series. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. How do you weather the storms when you're not going to play well for, let's just say it's a 7-game series. You're not going to play a great game every game. You're going to have times where the other team is playing really well, and how do you weather those storms? But certainly he's going to have to watch himself, be emotionally involved without going over that line, and understanding you're not going to get all the calls that you do in the regular season because it's a much different game.
Of course, they could just bench him, right, and call it load management, right, and get away from it. I'm curious, though, when you played in your era, I mean, listen, I'm sure players were rested down the stretch before, the playoffs to a certain extent. But how would you have reacted if your coach said, listen, our data tells us, Matthew, that you're on the cusp of overextending yourself and you need a couple of games off?
I would have said it's bullcrap because you guys don't play me enough. Maybe if you were playing me 20 minutes a night instead of 13, then the data might be okay. I wanted to be in every single game. The only time I wanted load management was at the start of the year and in preseason games when all the dummies were called up from the minors, or all the young kids trying to fight their way out, and you'd have to be the guy to submit. But I wanted to be in every game. But I understand if also there's kids from the minors you're trying to give a shot. I think too sometimes, or guys you sign out of college, you might want to get them into the game, and it's okay to miss a game. You're starting again. We talked about the game tonight or game against Columbus. Guys are already mentally preparing for what's going to happen in 2 weeks. That's their main focus. So as long as you don't have any bonuses that you can make some extra money on, because let's not kid ourselves, the wives spend a lot of money. We got to make enough of it that we don't have to retire too late in life.
No kidding, Bunny. Thanks so much for this. Really enjoyed it. We could talk for a lot longer, but we're out of time. We'll talk to you real soon.
All right. Cheers, guys. Great show.
That's Matthew Barnaby, Bet 99. Really interesting, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
About just that level of emotion in hockey.
Again, you need to play that level of motion to be successful, especially in hockey, the fastest, most physical, most skilled sport on ice, or of all the sports. So it's refreshing to see that people wanted to play all the time, not like now where people want to take load management off.
Yeah, and listen, I was always taught playing rugby, listen, if you don't play 100%, that's when you get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure it's the same in hockey
Absolutely.
as well. All right, time for one more break. When we come back, we'll break down some more of what George Laraque told Albert, a fascinating interview earlier in today's show.